There are responsibilities and the need for interventions at various levels. Government has a responsibility, right, to design and to implement good policies. But designing and implementing good policies by themselves may not achieve anything. But individuals at the other end of the spectrum, individuals as single individuals and as households, they have responsibilities. And one of the things that they need to do, particularly when it comes to children and obesity and all this kind of thing, food security, is to provide the kind of training and sensitization to their children on the importance of eating healthy foods. But if parents are not educated, then society and government and various institutions have a responsibility of sensitizing parents, educating parents on what is nutritious, what is healthy, what is good for children, and what is not so good for children. So there are levels of interventions. You have the government on the one hand, designing good and implementing good policy. On the other hand, at the level of the family, of parents educating their children. And you need community-based organizations, civil society organizations to help families along this process. Government institutions are there to implement projects and so on that can contribute to food security, but that will not solve a lot of the problems that individuals have dealing with obesity and malnutrition and so on.
Our farming population is aging, and a lot of times I say in the next 20 years we may not have a lot of farmers left. Very, very little because of our terrain. Because of our hills and valleys, you cannot put a tractor on a valley, on a hill, you know, and a lot of persons have to do it manually. Because of the distance to the road. Here it's easy, but because of distance to the road, you have to do a lot of carrying on your head. And I mean, who's going to do that, you know?
I'm not talking about self-sufficiency necessarily, you know. I think one would be idiotic to imply that small territories can provide all the food. But I still think that there's a crucial minimum, if you like, that should be sourced locally, and that you should be able to, literally at the drop of a hat or the drop of a coconut tree falling in a hurricane, be able to bump up and ramp up your local production.
You're saying we shouldn't keep depending on outside sources to help us?
But we can't. I mean, you know, we are in part of the problems we are facing now have been caused by assistance. Assistance is part of the problem, you know, right? When we get food aid, and so food aid ties you into a particular pattern of diet, and so, you know, which has been shown in other parts of the world to be detrimental to your local agriculture.
Pre-deal nasty, big problem. Big problem.
How do you solve it?
Let me tell you how.
Finish the first question.
Big problem. That has driven the average farmer out of agriculture.
Some of what we're seeing comes from a false nation, a false and flawed notion of what represents and what constitutes agriculture and what constitutes rural. We have the flawed notion, following all these development models that we had of the 60s and modernization, that agriculture is essentially a precursor to urban, and that is a fallacy. The rural, I said agriculture, but rather rural is a precursor to urban. So and urban becomes a more advanced stage of what constitutes rural. That is a fallacy in itself. We must begin to look at our rural policies and recognize that there's a rural in its own right with its own rural characteristics.
Well, the market, to be able to sell your produce, which is not always available.
So you have challenges with markets?
Yes, because sometimes when you plant, you see like when people plant and then you have in abundance, then the price go down. So that's a challenge when the price go down.
And tell me again, what are your other challenges? What are your top challenges as farmers?
Well, we may not have enough, money. We may not have enough money for inputs like fertilizers and other weedicides and those stuff.
We speak of policies for women and the equitable distribution of of resources towards women, because they recognize that there is inequity within the society.
Seeing that women are most of the support of the background of farming, mostly women. We know that the men go out and sell and whatever, but the working of the land, the weeding of the crops and everything is women. I think women should get more involved in farming.
But if you don't include them in the decision making, in the implementation, all along in what you are trying to do for them, who are you really doing it for?
We know that we are kind of challenged because of finance. We are challenged with finance, inputs for the plants and so on. That's why it is more beneficial to be in a group where we can tap the resources, the fundings to help.
I believe if there is more collaboration between the various development agencies, so that we could avoid the duplication of efforts, that we could maximize the utilization of our resources around the Caribbean and small islands. If we could have a regional approach to many initiatives, we could better utilize the scarce resources available to us, and we could achieve greater impact. The level of collaboration that exists outside of scheduled meetings for the year, I don't think it is sufficient. There is still the tendency for people to protect their turf, and everybody wants the visibility for themselves out of the initiative, forgetting that our true purpose is to impact positively on the youth and on the women on the ground.
Just before we got all of this money for us to be able to put in, it was something like something like at least a 75% was imported, because we had things like rice on the menu. We had, of course, lentils with that, which is, of course, imported, because the children would be getting the imported peas and imported beans, and of course the meat kind, which would be things like turkey and chicken, and different chicken parts. We have things like salt fish on the menu, but then again, we do not produce this. So all of this comes from overseas. So quite a large chunk would have been. At one point, what we would expect would be the vegetables and the fruits, more or less, would definitely be, and of course all of the seasonings would be all local.
So we have the plan, but we, as a region, we have a problem with implementation. And for my rate of reasons, we make these illustrious plans, and we have been planning and planning and planning. But unless we get to a stage where there's an active push for implementation in the countries, I think 2 years down the road, the plan may be at the same place we are today.
I think the biggest challenge that we have is one of the things where we have like free trade, and because we have free trade, we are basically forced to bring in stuff that we do not produce. Because we would have to import a certain amount of things that most probably we would be able to produce ourselves. And for the convenience of it, of course, people would go out and purchase all of the rice and purchase all of the pastas and things like that. If the situation was not like this, if we had to totally depend on the things that we were producing in Dominica, I believe 100% that we could be self-sufficient.
Unless we sort out the transportation problems, we will be talking about food and nutrition security for a long time. How do we move the mass production from Guyana across the region? What capacity do we have? Many years ago, I worked for a company that operated a shipping line. It used to move from Jamaica all the way down to Guyana. There was a ship that used to bring produce and dry goods and so on. So when it left Jamaica today, it got to Guyana 3 weeks down the road. Can we afford to move produce? Produce can't move that way. But what is equality at the end? Air transportation, you can't airlift yams and the cheens because air transportation or air cargo is expensive. So you have removed the competition, the competitive edge that you have for that quality machine that can be produced in Dominica, and it can compete in the marketplace by not having structures or infrastructure to take it out of Dominica. And we have a problem of transportation.
When it comes to going north of Dominica, we have no problems. I mean, we have a choice of who we want to go with. The only problem is the standards of those boats. You know, they're not really designed to carry perishable. So that is one of the problems. But getting north is not a problem. Going south, however, is a big problem. Tropical shipping, geese, twice a month, maybe 3 times a month, and the cost is prohibitive. LIAT has introduced a cargo service. We're looking at that. It is looking, price competitive, and we're trying to work out a special deal with LIAT. We're hoping that by the time our new production comes on stream, we'll be able to take the whole 8,000 pounds available.
We have to stop piecemealing the planning for agriculture in the countries. And as we move through the countries, and even with this Caribbean Week of Agriculture, we're still not addressing, while we are addressing some issues, but we're not connecting the dots still. And unless we sit down and have a comprehensive development strategy, development plan in the countries, of which agriculture is one pillar, then I think we are still going to be in trouble 5 years down the road.
The major stopper is starting up capital. The banks aren't your friends. The government aren't dispersing as you would want them to in order to help you to prop up agriculture. And perennial larceny is another contender in regards to, you getting into farming full time. And these are some things that, you must be mindful of, and they have their economic implications as well.
The other challenge that we have is not enough personnel to help with the education of proper nutrition, because one of the things right now we are looking at the different diseases that are associated with the lack of proper nutrition. If only we had personnel out there really educating the person, putting the education, even from our school system. And that is why I'm happy that we have the opportunity to start even with the school feeding program to be able to instill those type of values in the children.
We fall back on agriculture when we have a crisis. Is that the way you fund tourism? No. You see concessions being given to tourists, you see tax-free holidays. And mind you, investment in agriculture goes directly into benefiting the rural areas. All right? Directly into benefiting the rural areas. It provides liquidity in the rural areas to sustain shops, to sustain households through either direct or indirect employment. Okay? Whereas, it is a common fact, the vast majority of the money made in tourism leaves our borders. Who are we benefiting? Can we sustain and grow an economy on a low-level employment, waiters, barmen, and things within and jobs of that nature within the hotel industry? Or can we have self-employed businessmen and women in the rural areas with the direct investment, with the money being used to promote the rural areas?